The next story is going to be about Puca. Fairy folk, if you like. And this story takes place so long ago. This story takes place just at the time when the first Christians were made it to Wales and began to preach. It takes place in a desolate valley in Snowdonia, a hard place, a place where you could not really scratch, could not get into bed, could not really scratch a living, except that scratching a living was what they did, for beneath the mountain were rich sources of tin, and everyone in the village worked in the mines, and they were helped by the Puca, who would lead them through tapping noises. They would lead them to rich seams, and if they got lost, they would take them out. And since the beginnings of time, this had been. And there was a relationship. The families in the village would take it in turn, and they would sacrifice a lamb or another animal, and they would prepare a sort of feast and take the feast in and leave it. And it would be prepared in a secret way with ceremony and magic words that only the initiated knew. Now, one day, all dressed in rags, a man came to the village and started preaching of a strange new God, a God who was not one God, but three gods, but also one God, and who promised that if people would drink this God's blood, they would be blessed, and who preached that the Puca were imaginary and these were false sacrifices. Now, people didn't really pay him any attention. They felt sorry for him, really. They fed him a little bit, but they didn't listen to him. All except one girl, a girl called Alice. Now, Alice was terrified of the mine. She had been there 2 or 3 times, and she hated it, and she didn't want to go near it, and she knew that in 2 or 3 years' time she'd have to go down. And she liked this story that there were no Puca and the sacrifices were a nonsense, and she liked the idea that if she asked this God something, he would give it, and she asked this God to get rid of the tin from inside the mine. Now, her brother was only maybe 4 years older than her, and he was already down the mine. And time came when it was his turn for the first time to do the sacrifice and prepare the feast and the offering. And he did it. And as he was going to take it, Alice said, listen, you're very tired. You've been working hard. I will take it. No, but you're afraid of the mine. No, I will take it for you. But I will take it. And she grabbed it and she ran off. But of course, she didn't take it to the mine. She took it to the Christian man in his cave on the hill. And they both laughed and said, well, what will happen is they will go tomorrow and there'll still be plenty of tin. And then we'll explain that we took it away and there are no such thing as a Puca and everyone needs to pray to our God. She nodded. She spent the next day in a state of great excitement, waiting for them to come back with their tin as normal, and then she could say that she hadn't given it and they wouldn't need to do it anymore and they would be free of the tyranny of these false gods. But no, long faces came out of the mine. They had found no tin that night. And her brother asked her whether she'd taken it, and of course she said she had, and he shook his head. Maybe tomorrow, but tomorrow not. And all through the village there were long faces. For they all had a good life and they all ate well because of the tin. Alice started to worry, and she thought that perhaps the mine was not such a bad thing. And her brother worried and worried and thought that he might not have done the preparation of the sacrifice in the right way after all. And he remembered the stories that before they'd come to the accommodation with the Puca, human sacrifices had been sent into the mine, but it might just have been a story. It might just have been a story. Now, at the full moon, Alice thought she heard a noise in the bed next to her, but she wasn't sure. And she wasn't really awake, but then she was awake. And she reached out her arm to touch the bed, and her brother wasn't in it. And she knew what had happened, that he had gone to the mine because he'd been talking about it. And she knew this was wrong, that if anyone was going to be sacrificed, it should be her. Feeling terrified, but also feeling that it was what she had to do. She got up and she took a miner's lamp and she lit it, and she hurried off to the mine to look for her brother and to offer herself a sacrifice. The fear inside her was very real as she entered the mine, but she had to get going. The tunnels went in every direction and she didn't know which way to go, but she went on and on and on and on as fast as she could, sometimes crawling through narrow tunnels, sometimes walking, until she was deep, deep, deep underground. And then all of a sudden, the light went out and she had no way of lighting it. And also she knew, in the way that you always know, that something was there, something within herself told her that she was not alone. She burst into tears and she addressed the Puca, who she was sure was there, and she said it was all her fault and that she was so sorry, and she'd listened to the man in the hill and she had taken him the offering, not to the Puca, taken to the man in the hill, and she was so sorry. And they weren't to take her brother, they should take her as a sacrifice instead, because it was her fault. Her brother had done nothing wrong, it was her fault. Take me, take me. And she collapsed, crying. And there was silence for a bit. And then she heard a gentle tapping. And she moved towards the tapping. And the tapping went away. And she followed the tapping down tunnel after tunnel, here and there, until in the distance she saw a light. And the tunnel went into a chamber, and in the chamber she saw her brother on the floor with one leg broken. They were so happy to see each other, and she explained what had happened and that she had brought herself as a sacrifice and spoken to the Puca. And as she said this, they heard a tapping on the ceiling. Looking up, they saw a rich seam of tin. And they both smiled. And there was something there. There was something friendly about the tapping. And then the tapping started at the entrance to one of the tunnels that led into the chamber. And she supported her brother. And they slowly came out of the mine. And then, well, that day, when the miners went back into the mine, they heard the tapping and they found the tin. They were not cross with Alice, for she had acknowledged and she had paid her due. But, well, I don't want to bring the tone of the story down, but let us just say that they were not best pleased with the Christian, and that, well, they made him to understand they were not best pleased with him, and he had to leave, and I don't know if he went somewhere else, but everyone in the valley lived happily ever after.